All right, we already talked about the Houston Texans uniforms. Now we're talking about the Houston Texans themselves. Danielle Hunter, Joe Mixon, who
Ooh.
they added and then gave an extension to. They lose,
Yep.
so it's like really interesting. They basically flip flopped here, dudes. They give up Joe Mixon, they get Joe Mixon, give up Devin Singletary, give up Jonathan Grenard, get Danielle Hunter,
Yep.
and then you have re-signed Dalton Schultz, which I thought was key. Desmond King, Kyrie Fairbairn. I'm a big fan of what they did this offseason. I give them A minus.
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher than you. I gave them an actual A. When you look at what they've done, right? You talked about losing Jonathan Grenard, who's a young ascending player, but now you get Danielle Hunter, a guy 4 out of the last 5 seasons that has had at least 10 and a half sacks per season, right? A guy that's constantly gets to the quarterback. You lose Blake Cashman, but then you get Azeez Al-Shaair, who is very familiar with D'Amico Ryans from the time at the 49ers. So I think you even get a little bit better at the linebacker position there. Name that's not up there, Danico Autry, to me, has been the most underrated player, Brinson, in the NFL for the last decade. A guy that is versatile, that can play inside and outside. So they've literally revamped their D-line, even though their D-line was actually pretty good because they lose Sheldon Rankins, they lose Jonathan Grenard. But I think they get a little bit better on the defensive line, which when you look at D'Amico Ryans, right, coming from San Francisco, that's what he wants. He wants at least 4 to 6 rushers that can constantly create havoc in the backfield and get after the quarterback. So I love right there. And a sneaky good pickup, Jeff Okudah, a guy that can slide into the slot for them. They'll probably get another corner still because it looks like Steven Nelson will most likely leave in free agency. But I like them picking up Jeff Okudah, a former first-round pick that can play that slot corner position. They'll get another guy on the outside, and then you also got Stingley on one side as well. So this was a team that exceeded all expectations last year. You still got a quarterback that's on his rookie deal only in his second year. Dalton Schultz coming back was massive, had a real rapport with him as well. I love what they did. I gave them an A.
It's hard not to be high on the Texans overall, just what they are. The only thing that scares me a little bit is the Jaguars did the same thing the Texans did last year, like 2 years ago. And then it's like, all right, last year the Jaguars are the team to love, and the Jaguars keep crashing back down to earth. You see
down to that quarterback position.
That's right. I think it's hard not to, when you talk about the Jaguars, it's hard not to look at them and say, man, really tough miss by them with the Calvin Ridley thing. You go from Calvin Ridley to Gabe Davis, and I really didn't have like an A+ year, but Gabe Davis is a hit or miss deep threat guy. They did add Eric Armstead, which is really nice. Mitch Morse, a good pickup. You bring back Josh Allen, Ezra Cleveland, Ronald Darby. I don't hate what the Jaguars did, but I think that they got cute trying to re-sign Calvin Ridley after the start of free agency and to try and save themselves from going from a 3rd to a 2nd round pick. And as a result, you have Calvin Ridley who signs elsewhere in the division. We'll get to the Titans in a minute, but they basically, if they maybe make Ridley a bigger offer before then, or just figure out a way to keep Ridley, I feel like a lot better about their chances. I just hate that you lose Ridley and a 3rd round pick. It's a bad look.
Well, I'll push back on that. I love what the Jaguars did this offseason. When you look at Calvin Ridley, right, there's a lot of things that you have to equate to him potentially not signing back with the Jaguars, right? One is age. He's 29 years old. He wasn't like
he's old. He's old.
It's not like a lot of guys that hit free agency at 24, 25 years old. He came into the league already old and then essentially missed almost 2 years of playing time with the Atlanta Falcons before he signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then when Christian Kirk got hurt last year, that's when you expected Calvin Ridley to step up and be the guy. And it just didn't happen. It was more Evan Ingram stepping up than actually Calvin Ridley. Now, there was rumors that he had issues learning the playbook. He also had some concentration drops last year. When you look at what they were going to have to pay him compared to what you're paying Gabe Davis, I think it's a home run. And I know people say Gabe Davis is hit or miss, but then when you look at it, right, there's a reason why there's an issue between Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, right? When you look at the target share compared to Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs, where there was games where Gabe Davis didn't even get a target in the game, or he may have had 2 targets while Diggs was getting 14. And vividly, I remember a couple games last year, the Eagles games coming to mind when Gabe Davis was wide open and Josh Allen missed him and they were arguing on the sideline. And there was another game after that where that happened as well. So, again, you got to equate also what is going on with the X's and O's when you're talking about hit or miss with Gabe Davis. But a guy that can stretch the field, and I think the biggest honor is when he was the number 2 receiver, a 4th round pick, and they named him captain. That kind of lets you know what his teammates about him as well. And he's got that dog mentality. I love what they did with Eric Armstead. Me and Pete Prisco were actually talking about that. I thought the Texans could make a push for him. And then there was rumors that came out that they actually did make a push for him. Again, when you look at him coming from San Francisco and being with DeMeco Ryans makes too much sense. But him going to Jacksonville, they needed a guy that could rush the pocket from inside, right, to pair with a, Trayvon Walker and also Josh Allen. So that made a lot of sense. Then they kind of shored up the interior of that offensive line, bringing over Mitch Morse, who's been a consummate pro at center. Ezra Cleveland, I was mad the Jets didn't try to give up a 6th-round pick for him last year in the middle of the season. Jacksonville did, and then they signed him to an extension. So really shored up the interior of that offensive line. And then Darius Williams, I thought, played really well. Now he struggled down the back end of the season. They cut him. And they bring in Ronald Darby, who had a hell of a year for the Ravens when nobody expected him to start last year for the Ravens. He played really well. So getting him for like $5 million a year was a big get for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I like what they did. But to me, like when we talked about Deshaun Watson, this Jaguars team comes down to Trevor Lawrence. Like, is he going to take that step as the golden child, as everybody has called him? Like, will he be that guy that everybody expects him to be? Only time will tell. But I know this for sure, Brinson. They've taken away every excuse he has not to have success with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Just one funny thing I think it's worth noting. Nate Tice of The Athletic, who points this out. But in 2021, Christian Kirk had one game with 100-plus yards, and it was against the Jaguars, and they promptly signed him in free agency. And then last year, game day, 3 games with 100 yards, and one of them was against the Jaguars. They're like, all right, we got to get him. I just think it's like Trim Balky's got some weird.
And remember, everybody kind of scoffed at that Christian Kirk deal, but when Kirk got hurt, that offense plummeted downhill. That lets you know how important he is to that offense.
Yeah, I mean, look, if everybody's healthy, they got certainly enough playmakers to make it work. The Indianapolis Colts lose Gardner Minshew, but get Joe Flacco. Fan favorite. You love to see it. Bring back Michael Pittman on the tag and give him a new deal. Re-sign Grover Stewart and Zaire Franklin. Also added Raekwon Davis and lost Zach Moss, but they still have Jonathan Taylor, of course. I mean, I kind of give this like a C+. I don't think I'm blown. I'm not really blown away by anything with the Colts in terms of they weren't hyperactive, but I do like the idea that you keep Michael Pittman for your young quarterback.
Yeah, I gave them a C because they added or re-signed a lot of their own homegrown talent, which makes a lot of sense. Grover Stewart, Michael Pittman Jr., Zaire Franklin, all were guys that grew up and developed through the Indianapolis Colts. So it makes a lot of sense. Let's not forget, this was a team with Gardner Minshew, the backup quarterback, that was one game away from making the playoffs. You know what I'm saying? So, like, they were right there. They were at the precipice and didn't get in when nobody gave them a chance. Again, coaching matters, right? What Coach Steichen has done there has been night and day from what they were, in years past. The Raekwon Davis one was a head-scratcher because him and Grover Stewart have similar games. So when you look at them, and they have DeForest Buckner, one of the best D tackles in football, like, who's starting and who isn't? And they paid both of them great money. So it's just like, it was a weird signing to me. They lost Zach Moss, but obviously with Jonathan Taylor there, then that shouldn't be a big major loss, right? Gardner Minshew leaving, getting Joe Flacco, to me, that's kind of like a middle ground thing. Like it's a fair trade-off, right? So I gave them a C just because they weren't really active. I do love them extending, Kenny Moore to an extension. He is the best slot corner in all of football and is the highest paid slot corner in football now.
The Tennessee Titans, I'm going to guess you probably don't give them a huge grade dues because they give Calvin Ridley an insanely large amount of money. They also signed Tony Pollard, brought in Lloyd Cushenberry as well, lose Derrick Henry, of course, Danico Autry out the door. They re-signed Nick Folk. It's the quintessential breach note. They also added Kenneth Murray and Chidobe Awuzie. They just today actually added Sebastian Joseph Day. I kind of look at this as – and they picked up Mason Rudolph, if anyone cares. I kind of look at Tennessee as and I do agree with you, coaching matters. Coaching matters a lot. If Brian Callahan, we know Bill Callahan's a really good offensive line coach.
Yeah.
They can add a tackle in the draft pretty easily, I think. Depending, they can even trade down for some draft picks and add a tackle.
Yeah.
If Bill Callahan does what he normally does, and if Brian Callahan's a really good coach, one, I think it's possible the Bengals offense sort of takes a little sideways step or maybe a little backward step. And then two, I don't know. I can kind of squint my eyes at this and look at the Titans and say, maybe the Titans aren't going to be as terrible as I thought they were. I'm going to give up B+ in free agency, but it's a lot to be determined. When you're signing a running back to a big deal, and then you're signing an older receiver to a big deal. Nothing guaranteed here by any stretch.
Yeah, I gave them a C plus. I mean, the Titans had money and they definitely used it this offseason. I mean,
Yeah.
we kind of talked about Calvin Ridley earlier. I just thought that was an aggressive number, like 50 million guaranteed for a guy that's 29 that has some concentration drop issues. And when you look at that deal, by the end of it, he's going to be 33 years old. So again, I wish nothing but the best for him. I just thought that was a bit high, but it's like you said, it's almost like they were bidding against themselves, but maybe they felt like they were really bidding against Jacksonville and the Patriots, who are rumored to want Calvin Ridley bad as well. And then you look at what they did with, Lord Cushenberry. I thought that was a good pickup. They did lose Aaron Brewer, but they, I think they get better there at center with Lord Cushenberry. And the Chedabe Awuzie one was a little head scratcher because if this was Chedabe Awuzie from 22 before the injury, 100% agree with it. But you could tell he wasn't himself last year. So maybe they're banking on him going back or being back to the guy he was in 21 and 22. I mean, that's the only thing that rectifies that. And you talked about the Tony Pollard one, head scratcher, just because him and Tajay Spears have very similar games. Like, who was going to be the physical back in short yardage? I mean, maybe Haskins takes over that role because he's more of a bigger physical back. But I was a little bit surprised. You gave him $8 million with how well Tajay Spears played last year. I would think maybe you'd give him more of a chance to be a lead guy, but, maybe not. Maybe this will be a 50-50 share. But $8 million for a 50-50 share is a lot. To me, Tony Pollard is going to be the starter if you're paying him $8 million.
I think it's at least a good, all right, we can get a decent look at Will Levis and maybe find out what we have sort of set up for the Titans.